If someone had told me 30 years ago that I would one day find myself perched on a hard hospital bench, clutching a worn, ragged bag and trying with all my strength not to cry, I would have laughed in disbelief. Back then, I had a life that seemed perfect, a devoted husband, a son I cherished, and a career I loved with a passion that made every day feel meaningful. But life has a cruel way of shifting the ground beneath your feet, and almost never in ways you expect or want. My name is Evelyn Ashton. I'm 67 now, and the one thing I despise more than the antiseptic smell of a hospital is the constant frustration and selfishness of my son. Paxton, Oil City has always been my home. A small, tight-knit town where everyone knows everyone else, where faces are familiar, and even strangers feel like neighbors. Once, it thrived on oil production. The rigs hummed, the streets buzzed with activity, and families like mine felt the pulse of possibility. Those days are long gone. Now it's a quiet, sleepy town, a reminder of faded glory and dreams deferred. I spent nearly 40 years working as a financial auditor, crunching numbers, balancing ledgers, and finding comfort in the predictable patterns of finance. Numbers never disappointed. People often did, most especially my son. Paxton was born 5 years after Walter and I married. We had waited so long, counting the months, dreaming of a child, that when he finally arrived, Walter literally carried him around the house, humming lullabies and whispering, "Our little king." Perhaps that was our first mistake. Too much love, too much indulgence, not enough discipline. When Paxton was 12, Walter's life was stolen from us in an instant, a car accident on a dark, rain-slicked road. That single moment changed everything. I was left alone with a grieving, confused teenage boy who didn't know how to handle the absence of a father, and I had to somehow become both mother and father, protector and guide. I tried. God, how I tried. I worked extra hours to make sure he had everything he needed. I hired tutors when his grades slipped. I ignored school principals' warnings about his reckless behavior. I told myself it was grief, that time would heal, that eventually things would settle into normalcy. But time passed and nothing improved. I sold family real estate to pay for his college, only to watch him drop out after a single semester. I secured him a job through my old connections, and he lost it within 3 weeks. I paid off his first car, then the second, and still, nothing seemed to stick. "Mum, it's temporary," he'd say, always perched at my kitchen table, his voice casual, brushing away responsibility. "I'll pay it all back when I get back on my feet." I nodded and poured him another cup of coffee. Always nodding. If anyone tallied all the money I had lent Paxton over the years, they could probably buy a small island somewhere in the Caribbean. Then there was Chamalea, his first wife and Hazel's mother, a sweet girl with dreams of baking and a quiet, humble life entirely mismatched with my son's restless ambition. No wonder their marriage lasted only 6 years. Hazel was born a year later, a tiny bundle with a head full of bright red hair, completely foreign to our family genes. Chamalea claimed it came from her grandmother. The moment I saw her, I fell in love. Hazel was smart, inquisitive, full of life, and her presence became my anchor. But when Hazel was 4, Chamalea left, vanishing into the night with only a brief note. "I can't do this anymore. Take care of our daughter." Paxton called me at 3 in the morning, drunk and sobbing. Hazel sat beside him on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, wide-eyed, trembling. I took them both in, though. Truthfully, Hazel was my priority, and Paxton had no other choice but to follow. It has been a year since that night. Hazel, now 5, is my joy and light. She draws fantastical worlds, spins tales of princesses, rescuing dragons, laughs at my old-fashioned jokes, and bakes cookies with me on Sunday afternoons. Paxton, meanwhile, drifts through life. He works when he wants to, fritters his money, and rarely involves himself in Hazel's upbringing. Recently, he introduced us to Trinity, a girl 15 years his junior, with plumped lips, bright eyes, and a keen sense for evaluating people and objects as if they were investments. "We're getting married this spring," Paxton announced confidently, draping an arm around her waist. I nodded politely and offered tea. Hazel, ever perceptive, squeezed my hand and watched closely. Trinity leaned toward her, cooing, "What? An adorable little girl. How old are you?" Hazel straightened, voice firm. 3, 4. I'm 5 years, 3 months, and 12 days old. And I'm not a baby. I'm a human being. Trinity recoiled, stunned, and I barely restrained a proud smile. My granddaughter had inherited her mother's honesty and courage, even if not her temper. A week later, Paxton moved in with Trinity, leaving Hazel with me. "Just temporary, Mom," he said, loading his suitcases into the car. Hazel watched silently from her bedroom window as he drove away, tears absent. Instead, she turned to me and asked with quiet determination, "Can we go to the park today? I want to feed the ducks." And so we went, as we did every Saturday. Simple joys became our little universe. Feeding ducks, sliding down the playground, buying ice cream from the pond kiosk. Paxton rarely called. Sometimes he sent money, irregularly and far less than what I needed. I didn't complain. My pension and savings were enough. Hazel and I created a world of our own, filled with adventures, museum trips, library visits, and strolls around town. One crisp fall afternoon, Hazel collected autumn leaves for her school herbarium. She held up a maple leaf triumphantly. "Grandma, look, this leaf is a crown. Can I be the queen of the park?" I bowed theatrically. "Of course, Your Majesty." "What are your orders?" She giggled. "Feed the ducks only healthy food. Everyone must be happy." Then her face changed. She paused mid-sentence, clutching her stomach. Suddenly she collapsed, convulsing on the ground. Panic clawed at me as I cradled her small frame, screaming for help. A man walking his dog rushed to our side, calling an ambulance. The minutes crawled. I whispered desperate prayers I hadn't spoken in years. When the paramedics arrived, they worked swiftly. Questions were fired at me. Any previous seizures? Chronic conditions? Allergies? I answered between shaking breaths. Hazel, my tiny, vibrant girl, lay motionless on the stretcher, an oxygen mask over her face. "We're going to Oil City Memorial Hospital," a paramedic said, guiding me into the ambulance. "Best pediatric ward in the county." I nodded silently, holding her hand. Her fingers were ice cold, and that coldness terrified me more than anything. Sirens screamed through the streets as I tried, frantically, to reach Paxton. The calls went unanswered. Not even his office could help. He was conveniently on vacation. I felt my chest tighten, realizing that once again, I was the only one who would save my daughter. Her and disconnected. Sure. Cancun pre-wedding trip. A thought flashed through my mind. He'd used the money I'd given him to fly to the resort while his daughter stayed with me. And now Thatcher's in trouble. He's not there for her. The ambulance pulled up to the hospital. The doors swung open and the medical team rushed in, taking Hazel away. I was pushed aside and could only watch as they wheeled her down the long white hallway. "Please go to registration," the nurse said to me. "We need to do some paperwork." "Are you a relative?" "I'm her grandmother," I answered, feeling the tears finally break through. "Her father is unavailable. Are you the legal guardian?" She continued, looking at me with professional compassion. No, but I hesitated. I have power olfactory from my son in case of emergencies. That was a lie. There was no power of attorney, but I knew that without it, I might not be allowed to make decisions about Hazel's treatment. Okay. The nurse nodded. Let's go fill out the forms. I followed her to the front desk, mentally making a list of things I needed to do. Find Paxton. Contact my lawyer. Find out what happened to Hazel. Oh, God. Please let her be okay. Please just let her be okay. I sank into a chair in front of the front desk and began mechanically answering questions, filling out form after form. Name, date of birth, address, insurance. Routines that helped me not to think about what was going on somewhere in the back of that building with my little girl. Only when I was done with the paperwork did I allow myself to pull out my phone and dial Paxton's number again. The beeps, endless beeps. And finally, voicemail. Paxton, it's Mom. Hazel's in the hospital. Oil City Memorial Hospital. She's very sick. Please call me back as soon as possible. I disconnected and put my head in my hands. There was a long wait in the unknown ahead. And somewhere out there on the beaches of Cancun, my son was enjoying life, unaware that his daughter was fighting for hers. White walls, the smell of antiseptic, and the quiet squeak of medical equipment. A hospital is always a hospital, no matter how many plants and brightly colored pictures are hung in the hallways. I sat in the small waiting room, clutching a plastic cup of cold coffee. It had been 3 hours since Hazel had been taken in for her checkup, and I still hadn't gotten any news. I checked my phone 4th time. Not one missed call, not one message from Paxton. I'd already sent him a dozen messages, each one more desperate than the last. No response. Mrs. Ashton, I looked up. Standing in front of me was a tall man in a white coat with a file in his hands. Dr. Raymond, according to the name tag on his chest. Yes, that's me. I rose to my feet, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. How's Hazel? What's wrong with her? Come with me. He gestured for me to follow him. We've run some tests. Your granddaughter has a rare neurological condition known as Raynaud-Gillespie syndrome. I followed him down the hall, trying to make sense of what I was hearing. Syndrome of what? I've never heard of it. It's a very rare condition, the doctor explained, opening the door to a small office. Please have a seat. I'll explain in more detail. The office was small and impersonal. A table, 3 chairs, a computer, and a cabinet of medical journals. I sat down, feeling my fingers go numb. Raynaud-Gillespie syndrome. Dr. Raymond sat across from me is a rare neurological disorder, characterized by recurrent seizures, progressive loss of muscle control, and in advanced cases can lead to neurological impairment. It's diagnosed in about 1 in 100,000 children. I sat there stunned, trying to digest the information. Is it treatable? There is no complete cure. The doctor looked me straight in the eye, and I appreciated his honesty. But with the right treatment, many patients lead almost normal lives. The key word is right. Treatment should be aggressive and started as early as possible. What do you need to do? My voice sounded strangely calm, even though everything inside was turning upside down. We've already started anticonvulsant therapy. He opened the folder and showed me some graphs and tables that told me nothing. But this is only the first step. It will require a comprehensive approach. Specific drugs, physical therapy, perhaps experimental treatment. Experimental? I questioned, feeling a growing unease. Boston is conducting clinical trials of a new drug to treat Raynaud-Gillespie syndrome. The results are promising. I can contact my colleagues and see if Hazel can be included in the program. Yes, please. I nodded, trying to remain calm. In the meantime, what can we do here? We've moved Hazel to the ICU. The main thing now is to stabilize her condition. Then we'll start full treatment. Can I see her? Of course. The doctor's standing up. But I should warn you. She's hooked up to several machines. It looks scary, but everything is necessary for her treatment. He took me to the ICU. Through the glass wall, I saw Hazel, small and frail in a large hospital bed. Tubes, wires, monitors. She seemed lost among all the machinery. Her red hair contrasted sharply with the white of the pillow. "Oh God," I whispered, pressing my palm against their glass. "She's under sedation now," Dr. Raymond said quietly. "To prevent further seizures, you can come in. But please don't touch the equipment." I nodded and walked slowly into the room. The smell in here was even stronger. Disinfection, medication, and something else indefinable, but unmistakably hospital. I carefully sat down on the chair next to the bed and took Hazel's hand. "Careful not to touch the floor." "Hello, my little queen," I whispered, swallowing back tears. "Grandma's here. Everything's going to be okay." I didn't know if she could hear me, but I needed to say those words out loud for her, for myself. The nurse came in and checked her vitals. "She's stable," she told me with a reassuring smile. "Strong girl." "Yeah." I squeezed Hazel's little hand. She'd always been strong. I sat by her bedside for hours talking to her, telling her stories, promising that soon we would go back to feeding the ducks and picking leaves. Nurses came and went, checking vitals, changing IVs. Dr. Raymond Dretton toward evening. "I've contacted my colleagues in Boston," he reported. "They are willing to consider Hazel for inclusion in the program, but there are nuances. First, we'll need to move her there as soon as she's stable enough for transportation. Second, the treatment is expensive and not everything is covered by insurance." "How much?" I asked, mentally calculating me savings. "About $150,000. I felt out of breath. I didn't have that kind of money. Not even close. "Yeah," I stammered. "I'll find the money." "How soon do we need to be in Boston?" "The sooner the better. I'd say within the week. Okay. I nodded, trying to gather my thoughts. "I'll get everything organized." When the doctor left, I pulled out my phone and dialed Paxton's number again. Voicemail. I left another message, trying to speak clearly and calmly. "Paxton, it's Mom again. Hazel has Reiner-Gillespie syndrome. It's a rare neurological condition. She needs special treatment in Boston. It costs about $150,000. Please call me back immediately." Then I opened the banking app on my phone. After Walter's death, I had become very careful with money. I had several accounts. A current account for everyday expenses, a savings account for emergencies, and a separate account I'd opened right after Hazel was born. This account was my secret. I deposited a small amount into it each month, planning to use the money for Hazel's education, college, maybe even graduate school. I wanted her to have all the opportunities Paxton didn't have. There was about $70,000 in that account now. Not enough for treatment, but a good start. There was another account shared with Paxton. I'd opened it when he dropped out of college, hoping to teach him financial responsibility. The plan didn't work, but the account remained. I didn't use it much, but sometimes Paxton would ask me to. Wire money for emergencies, like a trip to Cancun. I checked the balance on the account and froze instead of the expected $15,000 I'd transferred for his wedding trip. There was less than $100 left, even though I'd put an additional $30,000 in there just a week ago. Paxton and I had agreed to set up a fund for Hazel's unexpected medical expenses after she'd been diagnosed with a food allergy. $45.00. It's gone. I opened the transaction history, feeling a cold rage building inside. Cash withdrawal, $10,000. Transfer to the Sunny Travel account, $20,000. Purchase at the Golden Lagoon Jewelry Store, $15,000. All the transactions air-dated last week. He didn't just take the vacation money. He took everything, including Hazel's vacation money, to buy a trip to Cancun, and apparently jewelry for his Trinity. I felt my hands shaking, not from grief, not from despair, from pure undiluted rage. All these years I've forgiven him everything. Blamed it on the loss of his father, his youth, his difficult circumstances. But this was too much. The monitor next to me beeped quietly, and instantly turned my attention to Hazel. Her condition hadn't changed. She was still sleeping peacefully under the influence of the medication. I took a deep breath, trying to calm down. Now was not the time for anger. Now was the time for action. I opened Instagram, an app I downloaded just to follow Paxton's rare posts about Hazel. I found his profile and saw new photos posted just 3 hours ago. Paxton and Trinity on the beach with cocktails in hand. Paxton and Trinity at a restaurant smiling, tanned, happy. Caption the last photo. Best vacation of my life with my future wife. Cancun love forever together. While his daughter was in the ICU, you was enjoying a beach vacation with money meant for her treatment. I closed the app, feeling nauseous. A nurse peeked into the room. Mrs. Ashton, you need to rest. Hazel will be asleep for a few more hours. Why don't you go home? Take a shower. Get some sleep. I shook my head. I can't leave her. At least go to the cafeteria and get something to eat. The nurse insisted. I promise to call you if there's any change. I reluctantly lied. Really, I needed to gather my thoughts, make a plan. I kissed Hazel on the forehead and left the room. The cafeteria was almost empty. Just a few nurses at a far table and an elderly man with crutches at the window. I grabbed a sandwich and coffee, doubting I could swallow a bite, and sat down at a table in the corner. I opened my phone and started making a list. I needed money, lots of money, and fast. I could take out a loan against the house. I could sell my stock, although that would be a significant loss given the current state of the market. I could ask my friends for help, though the thought of asking for money disgusted me, and something had to be done about Paxton. I couldn't let him keep siphoning money out of the account that was supposed to provide for Hazel's treatment. My gaze fell on a name on my contact list. Morton Walden, an old friend of mine, and one of the best lawyers in Oil City. We'd met back in college, and though our paths had diverged, I went into finance, he into law. We'd kept in touch over the years. It was Morton who helped me with legal matters after Walter died. I pressed his number without thinking about the fact that it was almost 9 o'clock at night. Evelyn. His voice sounded surprised. Is something wrong, Morton? I need your help. I sighed, feeling my throat constrict. Hazel's in hospital. She has a rare disease. She needs expensive treatment in Boston. And Paxton, I stammered, not knowing how to explain my son's behavior without it sounding like a complete betrayal. Paxton. What? Morton's voice turned steely. He was always perceptive. He took the money set aside for Hazel's treatment and flew off to Cancun with his new girlfriend. He's not answering calls or texts. And Hazel, she's very sick, Morton. There was a pause, and I could almost physically feel Morton choosing words to avoid expressing everything he thought about my son. I'll be at the hospital in 20 minutes, he said at last. Which room is Hazel in? ICU. Room 312. But Morton, it's almost night time. You didn't have to. 20 minutes, Evelyn, he said firmly, and passed out. I leaned back in my chair, feeling oddly relieved. For the first time since Hazel had passed out in the park, I felt like I wasn't alone. I decided to take action. When Morton showed up at the hospital, I felt a rush of energy. He always had that effect. His quiet confidence and methodical nature made me believe there was a way out of any situation. We went up to Hazel's room where we talked, quietly in the corner while the nurse checked the readings on the instruments. Morton, the nurse, came out. Paxton has to come back and take responsibility. And to get him to do that, I have to cut off his access to money. Morton nodded, showing no surprise. He knew me well enough to know that if I made the decision, I'd do whatever was necessary. What sources of income does he have besides the general account? He asked, pulling out a notebook. A salary at an advertising agency, but he doesn't get much there. I know he keeps some money in a personal account, but it's no more than 3 or 4,000. All serious expenses have always been covered by the general account. Credit cards. 2. The main one was tied to the joint account. The second one had a small limit, no more than $2,000. Morton jotted down this information and tapped his pen thoughtfully on his notepad. Do you have access to the joint account full? I smiled weakly. I'd insisted on it when I opened the account. 30 years as a financial auditor had taught me something. Paxton has the right to use the funds, but only the owner, which is me, can change the terms of the account. Good. Morton looked satisfied. Then here's what we'll do. You're going to block his access to the joint account. I'll call the credit card company. I have connections there, and they'll help freeze his cards. Then we'll contact the hotel in Cancun. I nodded, opening the banking app on my phone. Once logged in, I went to the account management section and navigated to the access settings. A few taps and Paxton's access was suspended. The system asked for confirmation of the action, and I didn't hesitate to click confirm. Done, I said, feeling a strange mixture of relief and sadness. The account is blocked. Morton, meanwhile, was already on the phone, backing away from the window. I heard him mention Paxton's credit card numbers, which I had provided him, and explained the situation. His voice was calm and professional, but I knew there was a steely determination behind that calmness. Morton had always disliked Paxton, though he never said so directly out of respect for me. Finished talking, he turned back to me. The cards air blocked now. The hotel. He dialed the number again, this time putting me on speakerphone so I could participate in the conversation. Caribbean Pearl Hotel. How may I help you? Came a pleasant female voice with a slight Spanish accent. Good evening. My name is Morton Walden. I'm an attorney. I need to speak to the manager. It's an urgent matter concerning one of your guests. There was a short pause, then another voice, malleable and more formal. This is Enrique Suarez, the manager of the hotel. How may I help you? Minus Mr. Suarez. You have a guest staying with you named Paxton Ashton, Morton began. I need to contact him urgently for a family emergency. His 5-year-old daughter is in critical condition in the hospital. I understand. The manager's voice became sympathetic. But I can't give out personal information about our guest, of course. Morton interrupted him. I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to give him a message when he gets back to the hotel. I also want to warn him that his credit cards have been blocked due to fraud, because he used the funds intended for his child's treatment for his personal needs. If he tries to pay with those cards or leave the hotel without paying, I recommend calling the police. There was a heavy pause on the line. Yeah, I understand. The manager finally said, I will personally relay the message to Mr. Ashton as soon as he returns. We will also make arrangements to secure payment for his lodging. Thank you. I will send an official email to the hotel's email account for confirmation. Very much appreciate your cooperation. Morton ended the call and looked at me. Now we have to wait. Judging by the time I'm in Cancun, it's the height of the day there. He's probably at the beach or on some kind of excursion. When he tries to pay for lunch or souvenirs, he finds out the cards don't work. He'll go back to the hotel and message will be waiting for him there. I nodded, looking at the sleeping Hazel. Her little face seemed so peaceful in the midst of all that medical equipment. What if he just used his spare card, or borrowed money from Trinity? I asked, feeling a pang of doubt. I don't think that would make much difference, Morton answered. The limit on his backup card is minimal, and from what you've told me about Trinity, she doesn't seem like the kind of person who carries a lot of cash around. Anyway, he won't be able to pay for the hotel and return tickets. He'll have to get in touch with you. I sighed, feeling a strange emptiness inside. All my life I'd protected Paxton, and now I'd back him into a corner. But I had no choice. Hazel's life was at stake. You're redoing the right thing, Evelyn, Morton said quietly, as if he'd read my mind. Sometimes people need to face the consequences of their actions to realize the weight of them. I know. I rubbed mitred eyes. I just never thought it would come to this. We sat by Hazel's bedside, occasionally exchanging phrases, but mostly in silence. Time dragged painfully slow. Nurses came and went, checking vitals. Dr. Raymond stopped by around midnight, reporting that Hazel's condition was stable but unchanged. Around 1 a.m., my phone rang. The number was an unfamiliar one with a Mexico area code. I glanced over to Morton and hit the answer button, putting it on speakerphone. Mum. Paxton's voice sounded tense. What's going on? My cards aren't working. And the hotel manager gave me some crazy message about Hazel in the hospital. It's not a crazy message, Paxton, I replied, trying to sound calm. Hazel is in the hospital. She has a rare neurological condition. She's in the intensive care unit. I've been trying to reach you all day. What? There was a note of panic in his voice. But, how did this happen? Why did you block my cards? We're stuck here with no money, because you took the money you had set aside for Hazel's treatment and spent it on vacations and jewelry for your girlfriend. My voice remained steady, but inside I was seething. Money that your daughter needs right now. I didn't know she was going to get sick. Paxton was outraged. It's not fair. Mum, you can't just block my cards and leave us with no money in a foreign country. Paxton, Morton intervened. This is Morton Walden. I represent your mother and Hazel. The situation is as follows. You used funds from the joint account that was set up to cover Hazel's medical expenses. That qualifies as financial fraud. In addition, your absence at the time of your daughter's critical condition could be considered neglect of parental duties. What the hell? Paxton's voice got higher with indignation. Mum, you got your lawyer on me. I'm your son and Hazel is your daughter, I replied, feeling my throat constrict. And she needs you now more than ever. But you ran it around. Let me talk to him. I heard a woman's voice in the background. And then Trinity picked up the phone. Look, Mrs. Ashton, this is ridiculous. You can't hold us here like hostages. We've had this vacation planned for months. Weddest of my granddaughter is dying. I interrupted her abruptly. And you're telling me you deserve a vacation with the money set aside for her treatment? There was silence on the line. Here's the situation, I continued, feeling strangely calm. You have two options. 1, you come home immediately. Paxton takes responsibility as a father, and helps organize Hazel's treatment. In this case, I will restore access to the account to pay for return tickets. And the second option? Paxton asked less confidently. Option 2, Morton interjected. We sue you for embezzlement of funds intended for the child's treatment and have your parental rights terminated. With your history of financial irresponsibility and your current behavior, the court is likely to side with us. You can't duff it. There was real fear in Paxton's voice. She's my daughter. Then act like a father, I said firmly. Go back and help her. She has Reiner-Gillespie syndrome. Paxton, she needs special treatment in Boston. That costs over $150,000. Insurance only covers a fraction of that. The $45,000 you took out could have made a big difference. I heard a muffled conversation on the other end of the line. Paxton and Trinity were clearly arguing. Then Paxton spoke again. Okay, we'll come back. But I need money for tickets and to pay for the hotel. I'll wire you exactly what you need for the hotel bill and the economy tickets, I said. Not a cent more, and the money will go directly to the hotel and the airline, not you. This is humiliating, Paxton exclaimed. You're treating me like a child. Because you're acting like your child, I said tiredly. Adults don't steal money from their children for fun. Adults don't disappear when their kids are in trouble. I didn't steal. Paxton started, but I interrupted him. That's enough, Paxton. I'll contact the Hotlambie airline. You should be on a plane home tomorrow. End of discussion. I disconnected without waiting for his response and put the phone on the bedside table. My hands were shaking, but there was a strange calm inside. The calm of a man who had finally made a difficult but necessary decision. You did great, Morton said, squeezing Miss Holder lightly. It wasn't easy, but it was necessary. I nodded, looking at Hazel, who was asleep. You know, all my life I've been defending him, just to feed him, covered for his mistakes. I thought I was doing it out of love, but now I realize that love isn't about indulging weaknesses. Sometimes love is hardness. Morton nodded understandingly. What do we do next? He asked, pulling out a notebook. We need to arrange Hazel's transfer to Boston as soon as she's ready for transportation. We need to find a place for you to live there. And of course figure out funding for treatment. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. First, I need to contact the hotel and the airline to arrange for Paxton's return. Second, talk to Dr. Raymond about transporting Hazel. Third, prepare the paperwork for temporary guardianships. I no longer trust Paxton to make decisions about Hazel's treatment. I can help with the last one right now, Morton said, starting to write something in his notebook. I'll prepare an application to the court for temporary guardianship on medical grounds. In such a situation, the court usually makes a decision quickly. Thank you. I smiled gratefully at him. I don't know what I would have done without you. You'd be fine, he said confidently. You always shave, Evelyn. It's just that sometimes we all need support. I called the Caribbean Pearl Hotel and arranged to pay the bill directly. Then I contacted the airline and booked 2 tickets on the next flight from Cancun to Pittsburgh, the closest major airport to Wool City, for the next day. Both times I emphasized that payment was only for their specified services, and no additional charges were authorized. Morton, meanwhile, was drafting the court application, occasionally asking me clarifying questions. His methodicalness and calmness had a calming effect on me. With him, I felt that I was in control of the situation despite all its complexities. Around 3 a.m, Hazel moved slightly in her sleep. I was instantly by her side, holding her hand. Her eyelids fluttered, but did not open. She's waking up, said the nurse who came in checking her vitals. That's a good sign, Dr. Raymond Said to let you know if there's any change. I'll call him. 20 minutes later, Dr. Raymond showed up looking tired but focused. He examined Hazel, checking her reactions, studying the readings. She's stabilizing, he reported with cautious optimism. The meds are working. If the momentum continues, we can start planning her transfer to Boston in a couple days. How fast do we need to get there? I asked. The sooner the better. I've already contacted my colleagues of Boston Neuroscience Center. They are ready to receive Hazel as soon as she is transportable. I recommend a medical flight. It's expensive but safest in her condition. I nodded, mentally calculating the costs: medical flight, treatment, lodging in Boston. The sum was growing by the minute. I'll make the arrangements, I assured the doctor. I would find the money. After Raymond left, I turned to Morton again. I'll have to sell the stock and possibly mortgage the house. That'll bring in about a $100,000 plus $70,000 from Hazel's account. But that's still not enough for a full course of treatment. I already said I'd help, Morton reminded me. And I know a few other people who might be able to contribute. Everyone in Oil City knows and loves you, Evelyn. I can't ask. You're not asking, I interrupted me gently. I'm offering. The difference is significant. My phone rang again. Same number with a Mexican area code. Yes, Paxton, I answered, feeling tired. Mom, his voice sounded strangely depressed. I got the ticket information. We'll be home tomorrow night. Yeah. I want you to know that I didn't realize the gravity of the situation. I thought it was just some common childhood illness, and that justifies stealing the money set aside for her treatment. I asked coldly. No, of course not, I stammered. Yeah, I'll make it up to you. I promise. Don't make promises you can't keep, Paxton, I said tiredly. Just come home and be a father to your daughter. Just for once in your life. I disconnected and looked at Morton. Do you think he'll really change? He asked, raising an eyebrow skeptically. No, I shook my head. But I don't care. Right now. It's Hazel that matters. If he can help with her treatment, good. If not, I'll manage without him like I always had. Morton nodded silently, looking at me with respect. The rest of the night passed in anxious anticipation. I dozed in the chair by Hazel's bedside, waking with every beep of the instruments. Morton insisted on staying with me despite my protests. He settled on an uncomfortable couch in the corner of the room, but I knew he wasn't sleeping either. There was too much to do, too many thoughts running through his head. In the morning, Hazel finally opened her eyes. Her eyes were cloudy from the medication, but she recognized me and smiled weakly. Grandma, she whispered so quietly I could barely hear. I dreamed I was the queen of the park, and all the ducks bowed to me. I felt tears run down my cheeks, but this time they were tears of relief. Of course they bowed, my little queen, I said, gently stroking her hand. You are the most important person in the park. Hazel smiled again and closed her eyes, falling into sleep. But now it was just a normal sleep, not medicated sedation. Progress. I turned to Morton, who was watching us with a soft smile. She'll make it, he said confidently. And you will, and I'll be right here helping Yalbeth. I nodded, feeling the determination fill me. There were many challenges ahead of me. The treatment for Hazel, the confrontation with Paxton, the financial difficulties. But no, looking at my sleeping granddaughter, and knowing I had that support, I was sure we'd get through it all. The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Raymond informing me that all the paperwork for Hazel's transfer to Boston was almost ready. I listened to him taking notes, and at that moment came a message from Paxton. We're at the airport. We leave in an hour. We'll be home by 8 p.m. Everything was coming into motion. The plan was starting to work. And I was ready for what would happen when Paxton and Trinity returned and faced reality and the consequences of their actions. The day dragged wondrously. I didn't leave the hospital, only going out to the cafeteria briefly when Morton insisted. I needed to eat. Hazel would wake up and go back to sleep, each time recognizing me and smiling weakly. Her condition remained stable, but the doctors warned us not to let our guard down. Reiner-Gillespie syndrome is insidious in its unpredictability. By late afternoon, I received a text from Paxton. We've landed. We'll be at hospital in an hour. I showed the message to Morton, who had stayed with me the whole time, working remotely through his laptop. Ready for the meeting? He asked, looking at me carefully. No, I answered honestly. But when had I ever been ready for anything Paxton-related? Morton nodded understandingly and closed the laptop. I'll stay if you don't mind. I think my presence might keep my emotions in check. I was grateful for the offer. Morton had a way of cooling the heated atmosphere with his mere presence. Calm, judicious, but with an inner core that everyone around him could feel. Exactly an hour later, Paxton was always accurate in his rare promises. I heard familiar footsteps in the corridor. The ward door opened and he walked in, followed by Trinity. Paxton looked tired and stressed, but still tan from his beach vacation. His blonde hair, inherited from his father, was disheveled, as if he'd run his hand through it many times. Trinity stood behind him, her perfect makeup unable to hide the displeasure in every line of her face. Mom! Paxton nodded at me, then noticed Morton and frowned. I didn't realize we'd have company minus Mr. Walden is here as my legal representative. I answered flatly, and as a friend of the family. Paxton snorted, but didn't pursue the subject. His gaze shifted to the bed where Hazel slept. How is she? He asked, and for a moment I thought I heard genuine concern in his voice. Stable, but in serious condition. I moved away, giving him a chance to come closer. She has a rare neurological condition, Reiner-Gillespie syndrome. It requires specialized treatment in Boston. Paxton cautiously approached the bed, looking at my daughter with an expression I couldn't decipher. A mixture of fear, guilt, and impatience. How long would it last? The treatment, I mean, he asked, keeping his gaze on Hazel. At least 6 months, I answered, feeling the familiar irritation rising inside me. But that's just the initial course. Reiner-Gillespie syndrome is a chronic condition, Paxton. It's lifelong. Hetton to me, a flash of panic in his eyes. For life. But, what about everything else? My job, our wedding. Wedding. I couldn't hide my bitter grin. Your daughter is fighting for her life, and you're worried about a wedding. Don't be so dramatic, Mrs. Ashton. Trinity interjected, stepping forward. Her high heels clacked on the linoleum off the hospital floor. Children get sick. It's part of life, but life doesn't stop because of it. I turned to her slowly, feeling the anger boiling up inside. This isn't a normal childhood illness. My voice was quiet, but every word rang with restrained rage. Reiner-Gillespie syndrome is a rare neurological disorder that can lead to paralysis and even death if not treated properly. And yes, life really does stop when your child is in the ICU. Look, Trinity crossed her arms across her chest. I understand that you're upset, but what you did, blocking our cards, forcing us to cut our vacation shirt, that's just manipulative. You've always controlled Paxton, and now you're trying to control both of us. Trinity, Morton said warningly, standing up. Suggest you watch your language. We're talking about a child in critical condition, and money that was set aside specifically for her treatment but misused. It was our money, Trinity objected. Paxton had a right to use it. Technically, Morton said calmly but firmly. It was money from a joint account set aside specifically for Hazel's medical needs. Using those funds for personal expenses could be classified as embezzlement. That's enough. Paxton raised his hands. Stop talking like I'm a criminal. I didn't know Hazel would get sick. I thought that it wouldn't be needed so soon. You didn't need it so soon. I couldn't believe my ears. It was set aside for an emergency, Paxton. Just in case of an emergency like this. Our conversation grew louder and louder, and he noticed Hazel stirring restlessly in her sleep. The monitor tracking. Her heart rate beeped more frequently. Please be quiet. I lowered my voice to a whisper. You're disturbing her. Paxton glanced at his daughter and took a step back as if frightened by her condition. Trinity rolled her eyes defiantly, but she was silent too. Why don't we continue this conversation in the hallway? Morton suggested, gesturing toward the door. We went out, leaving the nurse to watch Hazel. The hallway was quiet with only the occasional nurse or doctor passing by. So Paxton began as soon as the door closed behind us. What exactly do you want from me? I'm back. I'm here. What else? I want you to take responsibility, I replied, looking him straight in the eye. Hazel needs specialized treatment that costs more than I can afford. You're her father, Paxton. You have to be a part of this both financially and morally. I don't have that kind of money, Mom. You know that. He said, I've always been struggling to make ends meet because I spent it all on fun and gifts for my girlfriends. I couldn't help my bitterness. You're 38 years old, Paxton. It's time you learn to live within your means. Don't talk to him like that, Trinity intervened. He's not a child. Then stop acting like one, I countered. Grown men don't steal money set aside for their children's medical care to buy their girlfriend jewelry. I didn't. Paxton raised his voice. It was money in a joint account. An account set up for Hazel's medical needs. Morton reminded him. It was. Clearly stated in the documents you signed when you opened it. Paxton ran a hand through his hair. A gesture he always did when he felt cornered. Okay, I get it. I was wrong. But what can I do now? I can't get that money back. It's spent. You can start by taking a vacation from work and coming to Boston with us, I said. Hazel needs the support of both parents. Boston. Trinity shook her head incredulously. We can't just pick up and move to Boston. We have commitments here. Jobs, plans. Paxton has a commitment to his daughter, I said firmly. And that commitment trumps everything else. It's not fair. Trinity turned to Paxton. Tell her we can't just drop everything and leave. Paxton looked confused, shifting his gaze from Trinity to me and back again. Maybe there's some kind of compromise, he suggested tentatively. Mom, you could go with Hazel and I could visit you when. I can. I felt something inside definitely break. All these years I'd hoped Paxton would grow up, take responsibility. But even now, when his daughter was fighting for her life, he was looking for the easy way out. You're not going to change, I said quietly. You'll never change. At that moment, a nurse came running out of the room. Mrs. Ashton, Hazel, she's convulsing again. I rushed into the room. Paxton and the others behind me. Hazel was writhing. On the bed, her little body arched. Monitors beeped. Nurses and doctors filled the room, pushing us back against the wall. What's going on? Paxton sounded genuinely scared. An exacerbation, the doctor answered briefly, injecting something into Hazel's IV. You need to get out. Clear the room. We were pushed out into the hallway, where we watched silently through the glass wall as the medical team fought for Hazel's life. Trinity stood off to the side, clearly feeling out of place. Paxton froze with a look of horror on his face. Morton held my hand tightly as if he was afraid I'd fall. After 20 minutes, that seemed like an eternity. Dr. Raymond came out to us. "We've stabilized her," he said in a tired voice. "That this was a serious attack. We need to expedite her transfer to Boston. We don't have the equipment here to treat these cases long term." "When?" I asked, feeling my heart pounding in my chest. "Tomorrow morning, if her condition permits," the doctor replied. "I'm already organizing a medical flight, but I must warn you that it is expensive." "The money will be found," I said firmly. "Do whatever is necessary." Dr. Raymond nodded and returned to their room. I turned to Paxton, who was leaning against the wall, pale and shaken. "Now, do you realize the gravity of the situation?" I asked quietly. "She could eat Paxton. Your daughter could die if she doesn't get the right treatment." "Yeah, I didn't think it was that serious," he whispered. "When you said rare disease, I pictured something like, I don't know, allergies or something. Allergies." I couldn't believe my ears. "You thought your daughter was in the ICU because of allergies?" "I don't know what I thought," Paxton exclaimed. "I'm not a doctor. How am I supposed to know all these medical terms?" "It's not about the terms." I could feel the anger rising inside me again. "It's that you didn't even bother to find out what was going on with your daughter before you flew off to Cancun to have fun." "That's not fair," Trinity interjected. "Paxton didn't receive any reports of his daughter's illness until yesterday, because he ignored all my calls and messages." I turned to her. "I tried to contact him all day when Hazel went into the hospital. We had a bad reception at the beach." Trinity defended herself. "And were busy with excursions." "Excursions?" I repeated in a lifeless voice. Of course, what could be more important than excursions? Morton put his hand gently on Miss Holder, urging me to calm down. "This isn't the time for recriminations," he said judiciously. "We need to focus on Hazel and her treatment." "Paxton," Hetton to my son, "are you going to Boston?" Paxton glanced over to Trinity, and I already knew the answer before he opened his mouth. "Yeah, I can't just leave for 6 months," he said, not looking me in the eye. "I have a job commitments, but I'll come when I can. And of course, I'll help financially as much as I can. As much as you can," I echoed. "And how much would that be, Paxton? Considering your last financial contribution was, let's see, 3 months ago. $500 for new clothes for Hazel. You're being unfair." Paxton looked hurt. "I'm doing the best I can." "No," I shook my head. "You're doing what's convenient. It is different." At that moment, a nurse came out of the room. "Hazel's awake," she announced. "She's asking for you, Mrs. Ashton." I went immediately to the room, Paxton following me. Trinity and Morton remained in the corridor. Hazel lay on the bed, pale and exhausted, but her eyes were open. When she saw me, a faint smile lit up her face. "Grandmother," she whispered. "I'm here, my little queen." I gently took her hand, trying not to hit the floor. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," she answered. "And my head hurts." "Where are we?" "At the hospital, darling. You're a little sick, but the doctors are helping you get better." Hazel nodded, then noticed Paxton standing off to the side. "Daddy?" She sounded surprised. "You're back from your trip. Yes, baby." Paxton awkwardly approached the bed. "As soon as I found out you were sick." Hazel smiled weakly, but her attention quickly returned to me. "Grandma, are we still going on the picnic on Sunday?" "You promised." My heart squeezed. Sunday picnic was a tradition we talked about back at the park right before she passed out. "As soon as you're well, sweetheart, I promised." We'll have the best picnic ever. With strawberry shortcake, Hazel clarified, her eyes brightening slightly. The biggest strawberry shortcake you've ever seen, I assured her. Hazel smiled again and looked over at Paxton. Are you coming to a picnic too, Daddy? Paxton froze, obviously not knowing what to say. He shifted his gaze from his daughter to me and back again. Yeah, I'll try, baby, he finally said. If I can. Hazel's smile faded, and I saw a realization in her eyes that a 5-year-old shouldn't. Have the realization that her father's promise was worthless. It's okay if you can't, she said quietly. Grandma and I will have a good time together. Those words spoken with such adult humility were the last straw. I saw Paxton pull back, a fleeting look of guilt on his face quickly replaced by relief that his daughter hadn't insisted on his presence. In that moment, I made a final decision. My son would never change. He would always look for the easy way out, always put his own desires before the needs of his child. And I could no longer let Hazel suffer for it. A nurse came into the room to check Hazel's vitals. She needs rest, she said gently. Try not to tire her out. I nodded and turned to Paxton. We need to talk outside. We walked out into the hallway where Trinity was tapping her foot impatiently on the floor, and Morton was typing something into his phone. I've made my decision, I said, looking directly at Paxton. I'm applying for full custody of Hazel. What? Paxton looked shocked. You can't just take my daughter away from. I can, I replied calmly. And I will. You've proven by your actions that you are incapable of putting her needs before your own. You stole the money set aside for her treatment. You ignored my calls when she was in critical condition. And even now, when she needs long-term treatment, you're looking for ways to avoid responsibility. That's absurd. Trinity intervened. You can't take away a father's rights to a child just because he doesn't jump at your behest. Not at my behest. I turned to her at the behest of doctors who say Hazel needs long-term specialized treatment. At the behest of her condition, which could worsen at any moment. At the behest of her needs as a child who deserves stability and security. You're doing this to spite me. Paxton shook his head, always wanting to control my life. And now you found the perfect way to do it through Hazel. I felt something inside me snap. Even now, he was only thinking about himself, about the supposed control of his life, not his daughter's well-being. Morton. I turned to my friend. Get the paperwork ready. I want to apply as soon as possible. Already on it, he replied, showing the phone screen where the document was open. Given the medical circumstances, we can request an emergency review. You can't do that. Paxton raised his voice. I'm her father. I have rights. You have responsibilities. I corrected him, which you've systematically ignored. And the courts will see that. I will fight. Paxton warned me. I'm going to hire a lawyer and I'm going to fight for my rights. With what money? Morton asked calmly. I understand your finances aren't in the best shape, and a good family lawyer is expensive. Paxton turned pale, obviously realizing the reality. Off situation. You can't do this to me, Mom. His voice changed from threatening to pleading. I'm your son, and Hazel is your daughter, I said firmly. And that's why I have to protect her, even from you. At that moment, the nurse came running out of the room again, her face anxious. Doctors, quickly, she shouted. The patient is having another seizure. We all rushed to the glass wall of the room. Inside, Hazel was convulsing, her small body writhing. On the bed, doctors and nurses surrounded her, administering enchanting, checking vitals, giving quick commands. I pressed my hand to my mouth, holding back a scream. Morton hugged me tightly around the shoulders, keeping me from falling. Paxton froze with a look of horror on his face. Trinity turned away, unable to look. In that moment, watching the fight for my granddaughter's life, I was finally confirmed in my decision. Hazel needed stability, needed reliability, needed unconditional love. She deserved better than a father who only remembered she existed when it suited him. And I was willing to do whatever it took to give her that better, even if it meant cutting the last of my ties to my Ounson. The next 2 days passed like a blur. After the second seizure, Hazel's condition stabilized, but the doctors decided not to risk transporting her to Boston until she was stronger. I didn't leave the hospital, dozing in the chair by her bedside, awakening at the slightest beep of instruments or movement of her little body. Paxton showed up twice a day, in the morning before work and in the evening after. Each time he came with a guilty look on his face, which was quickly replaced by impatience when Hazel didn't wake up or was too weak to talk. Trinity no longer accompanied him. Apparently, the hospital atmosphere was too depressing for her refined nature. Morton worked with incredible efficiency. Just a day after our conversation, he obtained a court order granting temporary custody of Hazel to me on medical grounds. That meant I could make all decisions about her treatment without Paxton's consent. "It's only temporary," Morton explained it to me as he handed me the paperwork. "But it gives us the time we need to prepare a full-fledged suit for permanent custody." "He'll fight it," I said, looking through the papers. "Paxton never admits his mistakes." "Let him fight," Morton said calmly. "We have evidence of his financial irresponsibility, parental neglect, and emotional absence from Hazel's life. The court looks at facts, Evelyn, and the facts are on our side." That same morning, a medical team from Boston arrived. They examined Hazel, reviewed her medical history, and confirmed the diagnosis of Reiner-Gillespie syndrome, a rare neurological disorder requiring specialized treatment. "We are ready to accept her into our program," said Dr. Clark, the team leader. "But transportation is not possible for at least 3 days. Provided her condition is stable." "What about the cost?" I asked, preparing myself for Thiensware. "The full course of treatment, including transportation, stay in the clinic, and medication, is estimated at about $170,000. Dr. Clark said bluntly without trying to soften the information. "Insurance might cover some of it, but the family would bear the brunt of it." I nodded, mentally calculating the available funds. I had $70,000 in Hazel's education account. I could sell the stock and get about $50,000 more. Morton had offered his help, another $30,000. But it still wasn't enough. When the medical team left, I returned to Hazel's bedside. She was asleep, her red hair strewn across the pillow, a stark contrast to the whiteness of the hospital linens. So small, so fragile, and so strong at the same time. "Well, be fine," I whispered, gently brushing a strand of hair out of her face. "Grandmother will make it all right." Paxton entered the room at that moment. He looked unusually determined, which alerted me immediately. "We need to talk," he said without greeting. "Alone?" I nodded to the nurse to keep an eye on Hazel and walked with Paxton out into the hallway. To my surprise, there was a man in a suit with a leather briefcase. "This is Philip Burns." Paxton introduced him. "My lawyer." "Lawyer?" I raised my eyebrows. "Did you really decide to go down that road, Paxton? You left me no choice." He sounded resentful. "You're trying to take my daughter away from me by using temporary difficulties against me." "Temporary hardship?" I couldn't believe my ears. "Is that what you call stealing money set aside for Hazel's treatment, and being absent during her critical condition?" Mrs. Ashton, Attorney Burns, intervened. "Let's not throw around terms like theft. Mr. Ashton had legal access to a joint account. An account set up specifically for his daughter's medical needs," I clarified, which was clearly stated in the opening documents. However, Burns continued without embarrassment. That doesn't give you the right to unilaterally decide permanent custody. Mr. Ashton is willing to take full responsibility for his daughter, including financial obligations for her medical treatment. I looked at Paxton, who was studiously avoiding my gaze. Where did that responsibility come from all of a sudden? I asked. And more importantly, where is the money coming from yesterday? You said you couldn't even afford a trip to Boston. I found a solution. Paxton finally looked at me. Trinity has agreed to postpone the wedding. We'll sell the ring I bought her in Cancun and use the money for their down payment on Hazel's treatment. Then I'll pay the rest gradually. I shook my head incredulously. $15,000 for a ring is a drop in the bucket compared to the total cost of treatment. And you think the court will believe your sudden financial responsibility after years of neglect? Mrs. Ashton Burns intervened again. We've prepared a payment plan that don't bother. I interrupted him. My attorney has already obtained temporary custody of Hazel for me, and we're filing for full custody in the next few days. What? Paxton looked stunned. When did this happen? This morning I pulled out a copy of the court order and handed it to Burns based on medical evidence and a history of parental neglect. The lawyer looked over the document quickly, his face impassive, but I could see his holders tense. It's only a temporary measure, he finally said. We can't challenge it. You can try, I agreed. But keep in mind that we have documentary evidence of Paxton's financial shenanigans, evidence of his absence from Hazel's life, and medical evidence of the need for a stable environment for her treatment. Paxton looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. You planned this whole thing, he said bitterly. All this time you've been preparing the ground to take Hazel away from me. No, Paxton. I shook my head. You created this situation. With every irresponsible behavior, every broken promise, every missed appointment with your daughter. I just finally stopped turning a blind eye. I'm her father, he exclaimed, drawing the attention of passing nurses. You can't just erase that. Fatherhood isn't just a biological fact, I replied calmly. It's the daily work, the responsibility, the presence in a child's life, and on all of those counts you failed. Paxton Burns put his hand on Paxton's shoulder, urging him to calm down. We'll discuss our next steps and contact your attorney, he told me. But I warn you, we're going to fight for Mr. Ashton's rights. You're free to try, I shrugged. But I suggest you first read the complete file Mr. Walden has assembled, especially the financial documents. When they left, I went back to the room. Hazel was still asleep, and Morton was sitting next to her, looking at something on his laptop. I saw. Paxton with Burns, he said, keeping his eyes on the screen. How'd it go? As expected, I sank into the chair next to him. He's threatening legal action. He says he's found the money to pay for Hazel's treatment. He's going to sell the ring he bought. Trinity in Cancun. Morton chuckled. 15,000 out of 170. An impressive start. He's always been good at making big promises, I sighed. But this time, I'm not going to let him get away with words. This is Hazel's life we're talking about. That's why we got temporary custody. Morton closed the laptop. It gives us the opportunity to tote immediately without waiting for his decisions. By the way, I contacted the clinic in Boston and agreed on a payment schedule. They agreed to start treatment with a down payment of $50,000, and the rest can be paid gradually. That's something. I was a little relieved. With me savings and your help, we'll be able to cover that payment. And I found us a place in Boston, Morton continued. Asmal apartment near the clinic. The rent is reasonable and the owner is willing to take a short-term contract. I looked at him gratefully. You think of everything. Not everything. He smiled. For example, I have no idea how to pack a 5-year-old girl's things for a 6-month stay in another city. Lols, I can handle that. I smiled back. I'd had a lot of experience packing Hazel's suitcases for weekends with her father, which he often cancelled at the last minute. Morton covered my hand with his dot. It's going to be different now, Evelyn. You're not alone in this anymore. 3 days later, Hazel's condition had stabilized enough that doctors cleared her for transport. The medical plane was ready to leave. All the paperwork signed. Her belongings packed. Morton took care of all the organizational matters, allowing me to focus on Hazel. An hour before we left, Paxton showed up at the hospital. He looked unusually serious, even depressed. He was holding a large teddy bear. I came to say goodbye, he said when we were alone in the hallway. Hazel was being prepared for transport, and to tell you that I won't be filing a countersuit. I looked at him in surprise. What made you change your mind? Paxton sighed, looking at the teddy bear in his hands. Your lawyer contacted Burns, showed him the documents you're going to present in court. Burns said I don't stand a chance with this evidence and that the trial would only make me look even worse. I see. I looked at him carefully. So what now? I'll sign the full custody agreement. Paxton finally looked up at me. On the condition that you don't ask him for alimony, which I can't pay anyway, and that you let me see Hazel. I considered his offer. It was practical. The lawsuit could drag on, taking up a lot of energy and money that I needed for Hazel's treatment. Right now? Okay, Ifenly said, but there are conditions. First, you agree with me in advance on all visits. Second, no promises to Hazel that you can't fulfill. Third, if you ever miss an agreed upon appointment without a good reason, I'll renegotiate the agreement. Paxton nodded, accepting terms. I want you to know, he added after a pause. I do love Hazel. It's just that I'm not very good at being a father. I know you love her. My voice softened. But sometimes love isn't enough, Paxton. Kids need stability, reliability, consistency. And now that Hazel is sick, those things are more important than ever. He nodded, and in his eyes, I saw something I'd never seen before. Acceptance. Acceptance of my limitations, of my mistakes, of the reality of my life. Can I say goodbye to her? He asked quietly. Of course. It pointed to the door of the room. She's waiting for transportation, but I think you have a few minutes. Paxton entered the room where Hazel had already changed into her traveling clothes and was sitting on the bed covered with pillows for support. Seeing her father, she smiled weakly. Hello, Daddy. Hi, Princess. He walked over to her and held out a teddy bear. I brought you a friend for your journey. Hazel accepted the toy, her eyes brightening slightly. Thank you. I'm going to call him Mr. Fluffy. That's a great name. Paxton sat down next to her on the edge of the bed. Listen, Princess, you're going to go with your grandmother to another town where you can get better. I won't be able to go with you because I have to work here, but I'll call you every day, and as soon as I can, I'll come and see you. I promise. I tensed, hearing Ganna the promise he probably wouldn't keep. But Hazel was looking at her father with a wisdom that wasn't typical for her age. It's okay, Daddy, she said calmly. I understand. You have a lot of important things to do. There was no resentment in her voice, just acceptance. The same acceptance I'd just seen in Paxton's eyes. At 5 years old, she'd already learned not to expect too much from her father. And the thought broke my heart. Paxton leaned over and kissed her forehead. You're the smartest girl in the world. You know that? Ik know, Hazel replied seriously. Grandma always says that. Paxton smiled, but I could see the pain in his eyes. Then it must be true. Grandma is never wrong. He gave Hazel another hug, stood up, and headed for the exit. At the door, Hess stopped and turned around. "I love you, Princess. Don't forget that." "I love you too, Daddy," Hazel replied, cradling her new teddy bear in her arms. When Paxton left the room, I followed him out into the hallway. "Thank you," he said without looking at me, "for taking better care of her than I ever could." "She's your daughter, Paxton," I reminded him gently. "She'll always be your daughter, no matter who has custody." He nodded, then suddenly hugged me quickly, awkwardly like when I was a kid. "I'm sorry I was such a disappointment," he whispered, and, without waiting for an answer, he walked away quickly. I stared after him, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. Something was over today. The long years of strained relationships, the resentments, the disappointments. But something had also begun. A new chapter in Hazel's and my life. A chapter without the toxic influence of past. An hour later, we were ready to leave. Hazel sat in a special medical chair, cradling Mr. Fluffy. Morton held our bags, coordinating with the medical team. I took one last look around the room, making sure nothing was forgotten. "Ready for an adventure, my little queen?" I asked Hazel, leaning over. To her ready? She nodded with all the seriousness a 5-year-old girl could muster. "We're going to Boston where they're going to help me stop falling and shaking." Right. I kissed her forehead. "And when you get better, we're going to have the biggest picnic ever with strawberry shortcake." "And ducks?" Hazel asked, her eyes lighting up. "And ducks?" I promised. "The best ducks in all of Boston." Morton came up to us smiling. "Everyone's ready. The car's waiting. The plane leaves in 2 hours." The medical team began rolling Hazel's chair out of the room. I walked beside her, holding a hand. Morton followed us with the luggage. As we were leaving the hospital, I noticed Paxton standing by his car in the parking lot. He waved at us from afar and Hazel waved back. I nodded at him, acknowledging his presence and saying goodbye at the same time. In the medical van on the way to the airport, Hazel dozed off, lulled by the traffic. I sat next to her, holding a little hand in mine. Morton sat across from me, occasionally glancing at us with a soft smile. "You know," he said quietly, so as not to wake Hazel, "I've always admired your strength, Evelyn. But what you've done these last few days is beyond anything I've seen before." "I'm just protecting my granddaughter," I replied, looking at Hazel's sleeping face. "Anyone in my position would do the same." "No, not anyone," Morton objected. "A lot of people would have kept closing their eyes, hoping for the best, taking the path of least resistance. You chose the hard path because you knew it was the right thing for Hazel." I nodded silently, realizing he was right. Making the decision to break up with Paxton, to have full custody of Hazel, to move to another city. All of it required a strength I didn't know I had until I was in this situation. "What's going to happen next?" Morton asked after a pause after Boston. "I mean, I haven't decided yet," I admitted. "Maybe we won't go back to Oil City. Too many memories, too much of the past. Maybe we'll start over somewhere else." "Sounds like a plan." Morton smiled. "And you know, I think I can help you with that. I have connections in a few cities. I could find out about good schools, neighborhoods." "You don't have to do that, Morton." I looked at him gratefully. "You've already done more for us than anyone. I know I don't have to." He shrugged. "I want to." I saw something in his eyes that had probably always been there, but that I hadn't noticed while I was busy dealing with Paxton's problems. Warmth, support, and something else I wasn't ready to name yet. Hazel moved and opened her eyes. "Grandma," she called in a sleepy voice. "Are we in Boston yet?" "Not yet, honey." I adjusted the blanket around her. We're going to the airport. And from there, we'll take a special plane. How's the Queen? There was a flicker of admiration in her eyes. Exactly. Morton confirmed. Like a real queen. Hazel smiled and closed her eyes again, cradling Mr. Fluffy in her arms. I looked at her at this small, brave little man who had become the center of my universe and felt a strange peace. There were many challenges ahead. Hazel's treatment, a new town, a new life. But now, in this moment, with my granddaughter by my side, and Morton across the room, I knew we could do it. I had severed my financial and emotional ties to Paxson, put the past behind me. There was a new chapter ahead, a chapter Hazel and I would write on our own, without toxic influences, without disappointments, without broken promises. The van pulled into the airport grounds, and out the window I could see a small medical airplane waiting for us. Our new beginning, our chance at happiness. A true happiness built on love, respect, and responsibility. We've arrived. The driver announced, stopping the van. Yes, I replied quietly, looking at the sleeping Hazel.